Hello, friend. Welcome back. I've been gone a while. It's interesting contemplating being gone here, how things shift that you don't necessarily understand require shifting. But my return marks an emphasis on deepening into spiritual guidance further, a shift more deliberately onto spiritual guidance themes specifically, deepening in spiritual development, becoming, emphasizing the contemplation of truth, the contemplation of isness, meaning what we actually are from an experiential perspective, in examination for validation, right? Rather than supposing what we might be or assuming what we might be without introspection. Looking at themes with the Spirit's perspective in mind, meaning considering consciousness, what we are, considering the perspective of consciousness in the themes being contemplated, whether it's personal limitations we're intending to grow beyond, or worldly, perceived external happenings, and we're trying to discern them and be considerate of the Spirit's perspective, be considerate of consciousness and the role of consciousness. Something I was doing prior, but as one remains intended on such with an intention of deepening, a deepening does take place. I haven't said God once yet, until just then. That might be in itself, it is, from my experience currently, definitely a shift is happening there. Not to make the term God derogatory or bad, but the term God often comes with great confusion and misunderstanding because it's inconsiderate of this renewed intent of considering consciousness. Okay? If your interpretation of God is inconsiderate of consciousness, interesting. The revelation is it is a sinful interpretation, meaning it misses the mark. There's the carnal and there's the spirit. And if your interpretation of God is inconsiderate of spirit, your consciousness, and is wholly considerate of the carnal, which is ego, you see how you're destined to have the sinful interpretation, meaning missed the mark. Now, when I use the word sin, I'm even probably interpreting that word, it's in itself differently than people who will hear me use that word, because I'm not looking at it from the perspective of the Christian interpretation, other than seeing it as defined as miss the mark. It's untrue. Okay? The interpretation is untrue. to interpret God from the carnal mind. Because if God is spirit, you must consider God from the perspective of spirit in order to have the true interpretation, right? Otherwise, alignment would mean nothing. And there'd be nothing to align to. It'd all be abstract. This is why deliberate intent has value. If a person, I'm going to give an example right now. If a person wants to live a happy life, would it be meaningful to them to examine their consciousness and their thoughts and repent every sad thought that arises? Would that be helpful to deliberately do such a thing? Would that shift their experience to a less sad experience? There's a danger in me giving you an answer to that. And the danger is you not doing the work for yourself to understand nature itself, the nature of consciousness itself. This is what this channel will be about, or is intended, being deliberately intended to be about, is to examine things considerate of consciousness from the perspective of spirit, rather than just hearing something and accepting it because it makes our ego feel good. Okay? Maybe it gives our ego maybe it provides us some hope where the ego was prior suggesting fear. Okay? So we're not looking to placate to the ego. We're looking to become inconsiderate of the ego, inconsiderate of the carnal mind, and more considerate of what we truly are, which is consciousness and spirit. Being considerate of what you truly are gives you the greatest ability to influence your experience. Being inconsiderate of what you truly are gives you the least leverage on such an effect, affecting your experience. If I think I'm my thumb, and I don't like the size of my thumb, my ego doesn't like the size of my thumb, doesn't like the color of the skin on my thumb, I'm going to have a hard time being happy with my thumb. But now when I recognize that I'm consciousness, I'm not even the thoughts that my consciousness becomes conscious of. I'm consciousness itself. Now when a thought arises and I become consciously aware that I have this egoistic program of a thought that doesn't like the color of the skin on my thumb, from a spiritual perspective and consciousness perspective, that thought isn't me. The skin isn't me. I'm consciousness. I can just repent it and maintain the peace of consciousness. So now when we begin to look at themes in our life that are providing us suffering because we're interpreting them from a carnal-minded, egoistic perspective, a shift can happen, oftentimes, maybe even every time, by surrendering the egoistic carnal interpretation and being considerate of the nature of consciousness. Okay? So this will be a deep, it's going to be it's going to be deep. There'll be depth to it because it'll require, if you want to understand it, it's going to require introspection. It's going to require a receptivity and an examination in order to breed its actual essence, to prove it true or to not prove it true, or to prove it true as much as you can prove it true, and be honest about not being able to prove it true beyond what you can prove it to be true. Okay? Authenticity. And everything that can be looked at in an illusionary way, because it's being interpreted by the ego or the carnal mind, can also be looked at and interpreted from the perspective of consciousness. And that's usually where we resolve the hang-up, the wrongdoing, the suffering, the wound, W-O-U-N-D, the wound. Okay? The wound doesn't tend to be external. The wound tends to be internal misinterpretation. Not by spirit, but by us buying into programs, biases, thoughts that we aren't examining, we aren't contemplating and looking for proof of truth. Truth will be a big topic here. As I see how my experience has changed, how my relationship with truth becomes, in the moments I'm empowered, united with truth, spiritual truth. Not personal, egoistic, carnal-minded truth. Is there a difference? We'll get into that. We'll get into it right now. If somebody does something to you that causes you to be angry, and you experience that anger, it's true that you experienced anger based on your interpretation of the situation. But is that the only truth? Or is there a greater truth that can be validated that you actually chose to invest in the suggestion and interpretation of anger? Therefore, you experienced anger. But you could have just as easily chosen a different response. So anger wasn't the only response to be chosen. This is where mindfulness comes in. It's only the response that you chose to have. So when somebody does something and you get angry, it's not necessarily true that they made you angry. What's true is that you made a choice. And you chose to consent to and invest in the idea of anger when you could have just as easily chosen to invest in peace and forgiveness. See, there was a truth underlying that suggestion of truth being they did something to make you angry. We're looking for unchanging truths. Okay? From unchanging truths, we can build a foundation, a compass that will help us discern, future things. And we're not meant to gain understanding and then rest on it. Meaning, if you gain an understanding of truth, we're not meant to put that in our back pocket and never ever challenge it. The revelation I received in the past was, let truth prove itself every morning. Meaning start again. Truth isn't afraid of being questioned. Truth isn't afraid of being challenged. In the past, I might have used the word God isn't afraid of being questioned. God isn't afraid of being challenged. The word God there can be dangerous because it brings a lot of baggage and belief systems that people haven't spent the time examining for truth, maybe been apprehensive or conditioned not to challenge it for truth, because that's where they get you. That's how they keep you disempowered. That's how they keep you spiritually immature and spiritually naive. But although I'm improving at not trying to be the answer for everybody that's not asking, there is value in seeking out the answer and challenging our belief systems and our biases. Because if you're suffering, you've got something wrong. Okay? There's something foundational that needs to be adjusted. I'm not talking pain. I'm talking mental suffering. If you stub your toe, you can have pain. Okay? How are you interpreting that with your mind? Now you have a choice to make. Now you have a karma. Karma not meaning inherently bad. Some people think that karma just means inherently bad consequences. Karma goes both ways. You think a sad thought, you create sadness. There's your karma. You think a happy thought, you create happiness. There's your karma. Karma is the reaction to what you consent or repent to. You think a sad thought and you repent that sad thought, your karma is peace. You didn't consent to it. You didn't agree to it. You're not investing in it. Great, you get peace. You think a sad thought and you invest in it and you consent to it. Great, you get sadness. Now we're understanding the truth about consciousness a little bit there. Creating sadness is great because it'll create. What you may not understand is we either act from a state of purity and righteousness in this moment, or we miss the mark. And your spirit is not telling you to be sad. Your ego would be suggesting that. Spirit has nothing to be sad about. So if we think a sad thought and we create sadness, now we're creating a form of suffering. That suffering is accumulative. And over time, it's a perfectly built system. Over time, that suffering will accumulate to a point where you won't have a choice but to take stock in your experience and your level of accumulated suffering. It will make you pay attention. And once you're inspired to pay attention because the level of suffering is sufficient, now we start questioning, how can I do something different? So in that manner, creation's a perfectly built system. You can't escape it. Suffering is the guardrails. Suffering is the guardrails. The wrong choice is the suffering. The unloving choice. Okay? Not the enabling choice. Well, the enabling choice too. But when I say the unloving, not the unloving choice. important to be mindful of the thoughts that we're consenting to, because everything within it has a response. And when we examine, if you think a sad thought, and you create sadness, that's a form of suffering. Did Satan do that to you? Can you validate that Satan did that to you? Did God do that to you? Is God testing you? Can you validate that God is doing that to you? Can you validate that God gave you that thought? Or that Satan gave you that thought? If we can't validate those things, why would we want to make the assumption rather than being honest and say, thought arose, it was sad, I agreed to invest in that sad thought, and now I'm experiencing sadness. That we can prove. That we can validate through introspection, examination, meditation, contemplation. But if you can't validate Satan did it to you or that God's testing you, it's important to be honest, because truth isn't about lying to ourselves, and truth is a liberator. If we want to make progress spiritually in understanding consciousness, it doesn't come by bringing along all of the confusions and misinterpretations about God and truth. Everything has to be held up to the light. Okay. There's an encouragement right now from me to you, if you're not already doing so, to increase your willingness to hold things up to the light. Don't take it personally if you've in the past consented to a misinterpretation. Celebrate instead in recognizing that was a misinterpretation and no longer allowing that to be a guiding factor. You're moving up in liberation. You're moving up in understanding. Celebrate. This is a beautiful thing. You're moving towards the truer version of you. You're refining out the obstacles. Okay? I do intend these talks to be a little bit longer, a little bit more slowed down for me to dig into something. Gives me space to receive intuitively revelations, to flow. Flowing is a beautiful expression. If you're not already doing it, flowing is the state of spirit. It's not so confined and constrained and rigid and dense. Interesting. Okay. I think I'll cut it there for today. This kind of renewed encouragement or renewal of the channels. If this is inspiring to you, if this is meaningful to you, if you resonate with this, from my understanding, it's helpful to have people subscribe or like the videos. That helps build the channel. It might help me build it to the point where I can do these live moving forward, which would be, there might be a neat way to use that as an expression too. So that's encouraged if you're inspired. Okay, maybe an encouragement for you to practice your day here is when you're finding yourself in a dense state, a state that's not playful, not loving, maybe agitated, is to contemplate am I looking at this situation through the eyes? Because this is what spiritual guidance really is. Am I looking at this situation through the eyes of my ego and the carnal mind, which is saying these things are negative and hurtful and angry and dramatic and sad, guilt, shame? Or can I start to contemplate what the state of pure consciousness would have for an interpretation on this situation? What would my spirit say about it? And that's an actual intent that you can state in that moment. What does my spirit say about this? How does my spirit, my pure consciousness, what you truly are, how does it interpret this? This is how you, if you do this deliberately, you'll start to build your intuition. And just stay present for 20 seconds after you deliberately state that in your mind. You don't have to say it out loud. Your consciousness doesn't need to hear things audibly. It just needs to understand that you actually said it, which is by you saying it happens. And then stay present for 20 seconds. Close your eyes. And just watch what comes, what ideas come to your awareness after you state that, looking for Spirit's intent. See what ideas come to your mind. This is intuition. This is building intuition. This is building revelation. It's teaching you how to ask and teaching you how to receive. Spirit will always be in alignment with love. It won't be encouraging you to be fearful. It won't be encouraging any negative emotion. Okay? It will always be in alignment with a loving expression. So if you get an unloving response, repent it. Rephrase your intent in consciousness, in your mind. Spirit, my highest self, the highest form of truth, the highest form of God. Give me revelation and insights on this specific situation. State it in your mind. Go quiet. Close your eyes. Closing eyes, what you're doing by closing your eyes is you're taking your attention away from your senses, your external senses. Because you're going inwards, you're trying to pay attention to what's going on in your mind. And watch for new ideas to come to you in the next. Doesn't have to be 20 seconds. You can get it quicker. You can go a minute. If you've gone a minute and you haven't received anything, restate it. But this is helping us now to encourage a different response. It's not saying I'm just going to consent to whatever egoistic thought arises and pretend that's me. Now all of a sudden we're making space for something more. We're becoming, okay? We're becoming something more. Only because, not because God's testing us, not because Satan's doing anything to us, because we are understanding the nature of consciousness and we're beginning to apply it. Okay? How empowering. How empowering. How empowering if you're ready to be accountable. How disempowering if you're still trying to play games and pray for something to do something for you that you need to be doing for yourself. Okay? Love to you, my friend. You are love. You are loved. Have an awesome day. If you are struggling and you find yourself suffering and you are interested in spiritual guidance, feel free to email omniloveim@gmail.com. All right. Blessings.